Welcome to CogX, Parneet. How are you?
I'm very well. I'm looking forward to my talk later today.
Well, we're very lucky because sometimes I sort of get the post-match interview and I'm saying, what did you talk? But we get the sneak peek,
That's right.
the trailer. So tell us what you're going to talk to the main stage about.
So, throughout this conference, everyone has been getting very excited about AI and technology, and I am too. I love the prospect of what it can do for us. But my talk is going to focus on one of the most beautiful, sophisticated, and deep technologies that's been honed over millennia, and it's present right now in all of our cells, and it's crucial not just for our own health, but it's shining a light on how our outer ecology communicates with our inner ecology. So, and best of all, and I think most importantly, especially when we, are cognizant of everything that's happening with AI and technology, we're now learning that mitochondrial health also influences decision making. So I'm going to be talking about all those things.
I need to zoom in on all this, but before we start, so we're not talking about circuit boards or software, or we're talking about going inside the human body here.
Exactly, and in fact, I mean, this is way more complex and sophisticated than most circuit boards that we know of.
So give us, I know we've got some biology majors in, but just in case not everyone is, give us the quick recap crash course on mitochondria. Where are they? Where do they come from?
Yes, so mitochondria, if you remember from your high school biology classes, were famously known as the powerhouses of the cell. But there's so much more than that. I mean, that's, producing energy from the food that we eat is sort of like the least interesting thing that they do in many ways. Mitochondria have a beautiful origin story. So they were ancient bacteria that about 1.5 billion years ago were engulfed by another kind of single-celled organism called archaean, and this ancient bacterium and this ancient archaean formed a mutually beneficial relationship to one another. So the bacterium had a safe place to live, and the archaean had a steady source of energy. And through millennia, that engulfed bacterium went on to become present-day mitochondria in cells of plants, animals, and humans.
So what's their superpower then? Why are you so intrigued by them?
So think about right now, everything that you're doing. By the way, how's everybody's level of energy right now?
We've got a 10 here on the front row. That's good.
Whether it's high or low, it's coming from the quality and quantity of energy being produced by your mitochondria. So the level of your focus, how creative you're feeling, how collaborative you're feeling, how trusting you're feeling of the people around you, your ability to have good ideas, all of that depends on the quality and quantity of the energy that the mitochondria produce. But then beyond that, mitochondria, we're learning, think of them like the mastermind that balances growth versus repair inside your cells. And this kind of balance is extremely important to keep all of our cells within what's called homeostasis, a safe operating zone of our cells beyond which we can't survive.
And in terms of knock-on effects, other than energy levels, what does this mean for example, for people running businesses, for anyone out there in the workplace?
So everything from the levels of your stress to the levels of inflammation in your body are controlled by mitochondria. So mitochondria regulate up to 2/3 of your epigenetics. Are you familiar with epigenetics, Oli? Yeah, so it's the mechanism that decides which one of your genes will be turned on or off at any given instance. And what's the most beautiful thing is that mitochondria don't turn these genes on and off randomly. They actually track how we live our lives. So they track how we eat, how we move, how we sleep, how we manage our stress, what are the kinds of environments, at work, or the social environments that we expose ourselves to. And all of that information is then translated by the mitochondria into metabolic reactions in the cell that are either if you exercise and if you eat well, that's good for your body. And so there's a particular kind of gene expression that moves you towards living healthier and longer. But if not, it increases inflammation.
So we're going to open it way bigger than this for any questions. But everyone now wants to know, is there a way other than eating well and exercising, can we hack mitochondria? How do we give them a supercharge? How does that work?
Well, actually, the research clearly shows that the most efficient way to boost both mitochondrial quality, but also the number, like the biogenesis, is movement. So exercise is actually the best way to do this. And any kind of movement that you do on a regular basis that gets your heart rate up and your breathing up is really, really good. Yeah.
No, good. Thank you. Noted. So we do our steps around the O2 today. That will be easy.
Yes.
Okay. So final question. We open up. Just let's go right up to the top line. Tell us a little bit more about what your overall work involves, because I know this will trigger some thinking and questions.
Yeah. So my main focus with Systematically Well is to work within organizations to address this the skyrocketing rates of stress and burnout, and also chronic disease, so everything from heart disease to diabetes to many different forms of cancer. And we've seen these skyrocketing rates because we are not taking care of our mitochondrial health because of the lifestyles that we're involved with. So what I do is I go into these organizations and work with teams and cohorts, and I run learning labs, and we go through this curriculum of getting to understand the science, and we talk about the different systems in the body, our cognitive system, our emotive system, how that ties into inner and outer sustainability, but then very importantly, practical strategies. What are the things that you can do in your everyday life to show up better at work, to have your best ideas, and then to go out and have the impact that you want to?
Right, so just out of interest, is this normal? Who has brilliant physician educators coming into their organizations? Is this happening? Is this, because we would like more of this probably. Right, who will open the bidding with a question? Could be triggered by something that Parneet has already said. Could be something much broader about health and technology, about stress, burnout. Who will get us started? Yes, I see you there, I see you. Why don't we come to the front row first? And then we'll go, I think it's Lawrence back there. Actually, I will stop saying people's names because they might not want to. Please.
Hi, Parneet.
Hi.
I wanted to ask you, what are, I know you've been working with a lot of organizations in different forms, and especially leadership teams. What are like some of the main findings that you see when you go into the organization, and what's the main difference that you are able to make when you leave?
Yeah, great question. So unfortunately, the pattern that I've noticed, no matter what organization I go into, is that people are suffering. And everyone is working long hours, and they really want to do their best work, but just the way that we've devised and designed our work cultures are not conducive to health. So that's sort of a finding that across the board. They're very thankful for when they learn of these strategies in lifestyle medicine, behavior change and neuroscience that I can share with them. What happens, the best kind of feedback that I get after the learning labs is that they now have practical tools that they can use in the moment, in a moment of stress. On the spot, they now know what is the most powerful lever that they can use, and they sort of have a toolkit that they can use and bring online every day.
Parneet, have you got examples of where an organization might be almost systematically unhealthy, sort of unwittingly doing things in how it's designed that are bad for its employees' health?
So most organizations, unfortunately, are not paying attention to the cultures. And again, not through any kind of ill will or malevolence, but I think it's really important for leaders to take an interest. And I think one of the key things that they need to realize is that, just as we were talking about what impacts mitochondrial health, it's all the exposures. So it's called the exposome, which is all of our life experiences from our conception till death. And we spend most of our lives in the workplace. And so the work exposome, the work culture, the work environment, which means your workloads, the kinds of social interactions that you're having with people at work, what is the condition, the actual physical structure of the spaces that you're working in, the technology that you're working with, all the other stressors, they influence the employee's well-being.
Yes.
But then, as an employer or as a leader, this is important, because you might say, well, what's in it for them, right? Well, there are two things. One is that we are seeing these high rates of chronic lifestyle-related diseases that I talked about, and that that contributes to most of our healthcare costs, so that's a huge spend for employers. But then the second thing is that if you want employees who are thinking differently and innovating and being creative, well, some of the most recent data show that even low levels of that inflammation that happen when you don't address these lifestyle factors.
This is inflammation in the cells?
Inflammation in the cells. It actually affects our decision making, which is, I mean, this is huge, right? So we're all walking around with these low-grade levels of stress, whether it's overt or covert. But what we don't realize is that biologically, the body perceives it as a threat to its survival.
Well, I want to pull on that thread, but I also want more questions. But just so we get a better sense of this, when you say affects decision-making, what do you mean by that word affects?
So biologically, when the mitochondria perceive, so remember there are these transducers of our exposome, right? They're keeping track of how we're living our lives. And when they sense something is off or if there's a danger, they try to mitigate that stress, right? So they go into the high gear and they do their best in terms of the metabolic reactions to counter that stress load in the cell. But then beyond a certain point, what I like to say is, we can't outrun our biology. At a certain point, you sort of go over the threshold, and then we're sort of the mitochondria are running in a deficit. And when that deficit happens, it's perceived by the body that, oh my God, like our survival is at stake. We need to do something now. We need to grab onto whatever we can get a hold of right now. So what this means is that we become more impulsive.
Short-termist?
Short-termist. We can't delay gratification.
Perhaps it affects risk aversion.
Risk aversion, but we also get stuck in old patterns of thinking and behavior. And when we're in this tunnel vision, self-focused state, it's really hard for us to trust people around us. So if you think about the ramifications of all this low-grade inflammation as individuals, as consumers, as politicians, as leaders, it's not surprising to see, we're not moving at the speed and scale required to reach our health or sustainability targets.
Fascinating. Right, let's go to the back here. Thank you. I see you there, and then we'll come to the front. Thank you.
Hi, Parneet.
Hi.
My name's Lawrence from Heatherwick Studio. We're a design and architecture firm here in London. It's really fascinating what you're talking about, and I think we are really interested in environment, the physical environment, and the design and effect on people. I was just wondering if you could talk, or if you've looked at any examples about the connection between the environment, the physicality of it, and your mitochondria.
Yeah, so thank you for that question. The most effective thing that you can do in terms of physical design is to help the design match the body's circadian rhythm. Are you familiar with the circadian rhythm? Right? Yeah, sort of.
So this is our inbuilt body clock.
Our inbuilt body clock, yes, Oli. So when we wake up in the morning, our mitochondria help to turn on gene expression that's optimized for growth. So this is a time when you want light exposure. This is a time when you want to move. This is a time when you want to eat and build. And then, towards the evening, when the sun sets, there's a whole different set of gene expression that comes online that's optimized for rest and repair. So this is a time when the lights should be dim. This is a time when you need to be resting and not be staring at your screens for a long period of time. But beyond that, also just the quality of the air that you're breathing is massive, because a lesser known fact is that actually air pollution kills, I think it's about 6 million people per year. But then that's not just external air pollution, it's also the air that you're breathing indoors.
So what would that mean just on the light, for example? We're encouraged to go outside, tells our brain to stop producing, is it melatonin, to sort of cut that off so we don't slow down again?
Yeah.
What does it look like in practical terms for a thoughtful, award-winning studio here, designing the office of the future?
Yeah.
What does that mean in practice?
So it just means that you want, our eyes, retina perceive light that's coming at an angle. So overhead lighting is good during the day, but you don't want that later on in the evening, because you want to switch that light exposure. So the blue light exposure is okay during the day. You want to have bright lights during the daytime, but you also want to have access to natural light as much as possible. So like huge windows and facing the sun if possible is really important, and access to spaces outside and surrounded by greenery as well.
Got it, right. What about really bright light in your face in the morning? Is that
This is really good. It's waking us up. It's pumping up our cortisol. Yeah.
No, good, thank you. Let's have another question. I think right in the front row here. Again, feel free to introduce yourself, and you don't have to.
No worries. Thank you. I'm Sam, CEO of Platin AI. Just got a quick question around kind of the differences between startups and corporates. We know that they are very different. Corporates can ultimately provide that environment, but startups are really hardcore and stressful, specifically for early employees. I wanted to actually mention one of the things, for example, when I used to be at Technician and Accelerators, one of my founders said that actually none of his employees left since the founding because they used to go to gym together, which is quite interesting. But my company, we are remote first, we can't do that. What do you think, we can build that culture ultimately for a remote first company as a startup, which is very stressful comparing to a big corporate?
Yeah. So all of the research on the causes of burnout point to systemic factors that contribute to burnout. So obviously on an individual level, you need to do the things that you can, move and eat the right foods and so on, and manage your stress levels. But as a culture, what you can do as a startup is to make sure that you're addressing those systemic causes of burnout, which include your workloads and workflows. So especially if you're a remote company, you need to make sure that you check in with your staff at regular periods and say, hey, how's it going? How's your workload going? And it's something very simple as that, but you'd be surprised how many times it's not addressed. Then there are other things such as how fair is a company, and what is the perception of autonomy or control that people have over the kinds of work that they do. Is there a sense of community and belonging? So especially it's a little bit harder when you're remote, but just making the time to have those moments of belonging and connection, especially one-on-one time with you as a CEO, that's massive. The research shows that managers and leaders have an outsized impact on the well-being of their employees, up to 70%. And so just making sure that you're building these communities of belonging, you're addressing the workload, you're making sure that there's no values conflict. So these are some of the systemic factors that contribute to the stress and burnout. So that might be something to think about.
I think I'm conscious we could delve much deeper into this, but I want to bring other questions in if they're here in the room. I'm looking around. Yeah, let me come down to the front. Thank you. Brill.
Hi.
Hi.
I guess I was wondering how much of it is hard-coded at birth. So can I be born with a superior mitochondria and just sustain more stress, or is it something that changes over your life?
Yeah, great question. So there are some, because you have to remember that mitochondria are really unique because they have their own DNA, because they were these ancient bacteria that were co-opted, right? So we, each of our cells has a nucleus, and the nucleus has our genome, the DNA that we inherited from our moms and dads. But then mitochondria in the rest of the cell, and there are many mitochondria, by the way, we have hundreds and thousands in each cell, and they're very dynamic. We're now learning that they have this beautiful dynamic system where they split off and they fuse together and they communicate with other cells, and it's really fascinating. So they have their own DNA. It's not it's just a few genes. So where the genetic part becomes important is if you inherit some kind of mutation in your mitochondrial DNA. So that leads to a small section of mitochondrial diseases, which often involve myopathies or respiratory disorders. But for the most part, the good news is that no matter what you inherited, your lifestyle has an outsized impact, and the exposures in your life have an outsized impact. So you have a lot of power to influence your mitochondrial health.
Fascinating question. How is mitochondrial health measured?
So this is where more research and is being done. So unfortunately, right now we don't have any direct measure of mitochondrial health, but there's some really great work being done at Columbia University, where they're taking a look at many different metabolites that mitochondria produce and being able to measure that. They developed something called the Mitochondrial Health Index. But again, that's just at the experimental level as of now. They're also trying to measure. So there are some remnants or fragments of mitochondria that kind of float around in our blood. So, you can measure that as well. But beyond that, we don't really have a direct measure, but we have indirect measures such as, because mitochondria are literally involved in every metabolic reaction, we can take a look at your blood sugar levels, your blood insulin levels. We can take a look at, do you have any deposition of fat around your visceral organs? Do you have any narrowing in your arteries? And all of these are sort of clues around that inflammation that is building up if your mitochondria are not functioning
That
well.
makes sense. Okay, I'm looking, we've got about just under 5 minutes left for other questions, observations. Cruz, I see you here. Thank you very much. No, it's for our online audience. Forgive us. Thanks.
Hello, Parneet. Thank
Hi.
you very much for the talk this morning. I just wanted to know what your opinion is at the moment, because there's a huge mandate on going back to the office for work. How are people going to sort of to take that? Because a lot of people are quite stressed about returning to the office, the whole commute in and out, the physical environment that the office is not prepared for. How will that now have an effect in our companies and institutions, taking an account of how that's going to change the culture, how that's going to change the stress levels within their workforce? What is your opinion on that?
Yeah, thank you. So what I've observed is that there's a whole gamut. It runs a whole spectrum of companies that are sort of making it mandatory to come back to the office, to companies who are super flexible and say, do as you please as long as the work gets done. I think what I'm seeing now, and especially, post-COVID, I think everybody was a little confused. Nobody knew what, and to be fair, we didn't know how everything would turn out. But I think what I'm noticing, the trend is people are kind of settling in the middle. So it's having some version of hybrid work, right? So come into the office maybe a couple of times a week, and then, work from home at other times. I think for us, it's important to remember that where it's possible, and I know it's not possible, especially if you're a startup, it's not always possible to have a physical location, but where it's possible, I think the environments where you actually have a human-to-human, skin-to-skin interaction is really important for that's a different kind of social exposure for your mitochondria, right? The kinds of ideas that you can connect with, the sense of belonging that you can have, the strength of the relationships and the trust and the empathy that you can build when you're face to face with somebody is, it can't be matched by the screen. So I think it's, and I think it's also really important when you're trying to brainstorm something or come up with a creative idea. It's just more efficient, and we've all felt that, right? It's very different when you're in the room versus
Power of that propinquity, really, isn't it? So with the companies you're working with, there is a school of thought that says, look, you've got a home office. What happens in that home office, how it's designed, is none of an employer's business. Until the employer says, well, if it is where you're working from, then it is my business. How are they navigating their way through those two positions?
Not well. And again, to be fair, right, I think everybody's doing their best with what they know. But I think it's time. I think it's time for us to really shift the paradigm around how we think about health and sustainability and well-being in our organizations. And so I think what leaders can do is, one, learn more about their mitochondria and how it affects their employees' health. But also, as I mentioned before, know that investing in the work exposome for your employees is only going to be beneficial for the company. Yes. Right? It's going to reduce your healthcare spend, and it's going to help your employees make better moment-to-moment decisions.
So my take, correct me if I've got this wrong, mitochondria are found in every single cell, hugely important, misunderstood, you're their agent-in-chief, but crucially important for decision-making. And if that was better known, then that ought to be on the in the inbox of business leaders, politicians, and what's getting in the way of that is this inflammation within the cells, which presumably leads to all sorts of other problems as well.
Yeah, you summarized that pretty well,
So we
Oli.
should, right, do I go to the top of the class?
Absolutely.
But I just want one more practical. So I've got exercise, healthy
Yeah.
eating. Are there any other more practical things? But education, of course, understanding, being aware of this, that we can take away, particularly as businesses, that say if you do one thing tomorrow to build on this, apart from reading more about your work, what would it be?
I would say for businesses is to just read up on the causes of burnout.
Yeah.
And I alluded to that before, which were the systemic causes of burnout, because those systemic causes are that the culture that you're creating is that exposure for your employees day to day. And so if you can start to tweak that in a way that's helps lower inflammation for employees, that's a really powerful lever that businesses can employ.
Yeah. Really powerful. I bet you're going to have more questions informally if you can stay just for a couple of minutes after this. But for now, hugely grateful to you. Please join me in saying a big thank you to Parneet Pal.
Thanks so
Parneet.
much. Thank you. Thank you.